yay, Beltalowdas! Welcome to the I Never Got Into That podcast. Tonight we are getting into
we're not
sci-fi.
No.
I got with the sci-fi epic
Philip.
series of books.
Philip.
I got. And
Philip,
TV
stop.
program.
No, you are not that guy.
Just doing the intro.
I can appreciate what you're going for here, Philip, but look at me. You are not that guy.
Yeah.
Me, on the other hand, I am that guy. And this week on the I Never Got Into That podcast, we are going down the science fiction rabbit hole of The Expanse. Welcome back to the I Never Got Into That podcast, the podcast celebrating fandoms of all shapes and sizes. As always, I'm half of the hosting duo here, Colin, joined across the internet by my good friend Philip. How are you, brother?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Boy, it has been kind of a crazy time for me, but I am well. I'm excited to be getting back to sit here and record and talk about a topic that you got me into. This is
It's been a minute since I got you into one.
It feels like it. Yeah, I don't know why. Although I guess to be fair, it's because it's taken me so long on this topic. We are recording this as we enter the later half of March, and I started this in December. We thought during the little filler time we had over Christmas, I was going to be able to just knock this out. And I don't know why I co-signed such ambitions. It is not how it went. Tell me, how did you first cross paths with The Expanse?
I think my friends Ari and Casey had mentioned it to me when the series started to come out as a book series that they had enjoyed. And then it was sometime later before I actually tried a couple episodes, realized this is something I'm really going to enjoy watching with my wife, Kelly, who's really a big fan of hard science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got into it and watched through the seasons as they came out. Probably started when there were 2 seasons out. And followed it from there. And that was my whole exposure until we did this. And then as part of getting ready for this, I audiobooked the first 2 books in the series just so that I could talk a little bit intelligently about how the book is and what the differences are, at least up through the first couple of books.
Which I'm very interested to hear, because my experience with Altered Carbon led me down the similar rabbit hole of, hey, I really like this in a visual media, and then reading it myself. This is one that, as a nerd who, much like your wife, loves hard science fiction, I was completely aware of. When it started, I do know, it was on sci-fi, and I've never been the guy who had cable, and so I never put in any work to find it. Mm-hmm. And then it was just one of those things that kind of, for me, got lost in the shuffle of being in the golden age of streaming, that we have so much all the time that, especially when you're more than 2 seasons or 3 seasons behind on something, you go, yeah, this is scuffed. I'm just never going to be able to find a chance to get all the way into that until you start a podcast with your best friend, which justifies you spending dozens of hours getting into things. So, like Philip tried in the opening here, this is going to be the adventure he leads me on. I have no notes here. I've got no research except for that I have watched every episode of The Expanse in its entirety. So, Philip, where do we come from? How did we get here?
So, The Expanse is the brainchild of James S.A. Corey, who, plot twist, doesn't exist. James S.A. Corey is the shared pen name of 2 authors, Ty Frank and Daniel Abraham. who are two friends who have both lived in, I think, Albuquerque for a long time.
Hmm.
Ty Frank started working on the setting, thinking that he would pitch it as the setting for an MMORPG, and then
Oh.
dropped that idea and started developing it as a tabletop RPG setting. And after a while, began sharing it with David Abraham, his friend. And David Abraham presented the notion that it would serve as a really good basis for a series of novels. Apparently, commenting that people who write books don't do this much research. And so the two of them began a process of writing. The process was that they split the characters. So the first book, Leviathan Wakes, was published in 2011, and in that book there are only two perspectives, Miller and Holden. And the way that they approached it is they split the two characters, with Frank writing Holden and Abraham writing Miller. And they would meet on a weekly basis to talk about what they had written. When they'd each finished a chapter, they would swap chapters, and the other would do notes and editing, and then they'd proceed with the story once they had agreed upon the basic shape of the two perspectives. As the series extended with Caliban's War, there are, as of right now, 9 books: Leviathan Wakes, Caliban's War, Abaddon's Gate, Cibola Burn, Nemesis Games, Babylon's Ashes, Persepolis Writing, Tiamat's Wrath, and Leviathan Falls, as well as, I think, 9 different works of short fiction, and then there's been some graphic novel adaptations and things like that in addition. So it's a pretty extensive piece of work.
Since 2011?
Since 2011, they've averaged a book every couple of years. Initially, they were getting one out every year. The most recent book, Leviathan Falls, took 2 years because 2020 happened.
I'm familiar with the phenomenon.
So yeah, so up to that point, so they were about a book a year until then.
What is George R. R. Martin's excuse again? What's happening there?
He needs a writing partner.
I guess so.
They've cited inspirations including Fred Pohl's Gateway, and The Stars, My Destination. Ty Frank said that Ridley Scott's Alien was the single largest influence on his work. So that's where we start to get the books, and then Amazon acquires the rights later. First, Alcon Entertainment acquired the rights in 2013, and in 2014, Sci-Fi announced that it would be launching a series. Sci-Fi had bought 3 seasons from Alcon, and they went generally well, but at the end of their contract, Sci-Fi decided not to renew, and the series was canceled. This spawned a massive outcry from fans.
It's my favorite TV phenomenon.
Who got over 100,000 signatures on a petition and crowdfunded money for an airplane to fly around Amazon Studios headquarters with a banner reading "Save the Expanse."
Wow. That's rad.
A number of celebrities from the nerdy community, including Will Wheaton, Patton Oswalt, got involved in the campaign, and ultimately Amazon bought the rights and produced 3 more seasons, the last one of which premiered in December of 2021, which was only a half season with only 6 episodes. And brought the series up through the end of the book Babylon's Ashes, if I have found the correct information, which concludes the war with Marco Inaros. And that is where things stopped. But as I'm sure we will discuss, the series doesn't really attempt to conclude the story.
Right.
It brings the story to, I think, quite a satisfying stopping point.
Lovely. Yeah.
But there are, especially in the B plots, several things that are not at all resolved, particularly with aliens and protomolecules going on. And so Frank and Abraham and Alcon and the showrunners have all said they're still very dedicated to this IP. And they consider this a pause and are exploring multiple options for continuing the story. So far, the way in which the story has continued is in January of this year, a continuation of the series was announced in a comic book series. That there would be a 12-issue comic book series that would be set between the books Babylon Ashes and Persepolis Rising, titled The Expanse, Dragon's Tooth.
Great name. So I love it.
Yes, very good name.
Wow.
The titles are all very mythology inspired, obviously. So that's as a mythology nerd, it's interesting to watch these things and try to interpret what exactly is the meaning of the title. But yes, cast, in terms of cast, this is a huge cast, and
gigantic.
I'm going to hit the very, very top core of this. Thomas Jane plays Detective Joe Miller. Stephen Strait plays Captain James Holden. Cass Anvar plays Alex Kamal. Dominic Tipper plays Naomi Nagata. Wes Chatham plays Amos Burton. Paul Costanzo plays an important character in the first season, Shed Garvey. Florence Favre as Juliet Mao. Sean Doyle as Sadavir Ehrenreich. Shore Agdashlu. I very much apologize to the amazing actress.
Phenomenal.
If I have mispronounced her name. As Christian Absarala, and Frankie Adams as Bobby Draper, and Kara G as Kamina Drummer. Obviously, there's a lot more recurring characters throughout the show, but that's a broad interpretation of main characters as best I could do.
Yep.
This is a huge and extremely well-chosen cast, a mixture of people who were established and relatively new actors, and I think brilliantly cast. I mean, I've only read the first two books, so I can't necessarily speak to how well later characters are adapted, but in terms of the first couple of seasons, I think the casting is just practically perfect. I've very much enjoyed that.
I'm right there with you. I loved everyone in this cast, and it was a genuine joy to watch the evolution of every one of those characters. Well, realistically, minus Julie Mao, that was not a pleasure to watch her evolution, but everyone else's character, sure. it was a really, really special to watch them be a fully fleshed out and realized character from your introduction all the way through the conclusion of each of those characters. Man, they crushed.
So we're mostly going to talk about the TV show with some discussion of the books as well. This has been adapted in a bunch of other ways as well, including comic books. There's been a board game. It has actually been adapted to be a TTRPG
Makes sense.
setting using the adventure game engine designed by Chris Promise. So it has become a wide-ranging IP empire in its own right, and as it should. It's a really fantastic and interesting world, and interesting, really excellent TV series. And I'm thoroughly enjoying the novels so far from the ones that I have read. I think that's where we get the Expanse.
It makes sense to have all of those have been avenues that were explored, because this is on scope, I think, right there with Middle Earth. I mean, this is so thoroughly thought out and fully realized that the relations between humanity all across our galaxy are so well thought out and so divided in such a realistic way that it's almost hard to remember that when I finish an episode, there aren't going to be politics involving Mars on my television, because it's just so thoroughly done. And it's such a realistic future in a terrifying way, because apparently hate persists, and that's just what we will do.
So if you're not at all familiar with the setting, a really incredibly brief overview is that in the, somewhat distant, not super distant future, humanity has expanded to Mars and begun to mine in the asteroid belt, as well as colonizing Luna. Then a drive is invented capable of of taking humanity way faster than we'd ever gone before. And this allows us to travel through the solar system all the way to the outer planets. Mars begins as an Earth colony and then acquires its own independence as the Martian Congressional Republic, carrying on the humanity's frontier spirit with a population made up primarily of Chinese and East Indian immigrants, with a small portion of Texans thrown in. And the book makes the point that apparently the Texas drawl is viral. And
okay,
so
hold on.
most of the population of Mars, in spite of their East Asian roots, speak with exaggerated Texas accents.
I no longer feel as at home with this representation.
On Earth, there is a single world government in the form of the UN, which is relocated to Geneva. Most people on Earth no longer have jobs, but live on basic assistance, which is a point of pride among Martians that that's not the way things are on Mars. And they have this dream of, over the next century, terraforming Mars to be livable without suits. Out on the belt, a subculture of an enormous number of mixed peoples develops that we refer to as Belters, of people who have grown up in low gravity to the point that returning down the gravity well of a planet is a painful at best, fatal at worst experience for them. And there are human colonies even farther out in the Jovian system and the open and the further out planets.
Out in the Expanse?
Out in the Expanse.
Oh,
Mars and Earth have a tense relationship, with the Belters largely caught in the middle. And the series mostly explores the development of the Belters as a more fully fledged and independent group in the world, due to the discovery, or at least in part, due to the discovery of a strange, unknown substance known only as the protomolecule.
Ooh, ominously titled.
Bum, bum, bum.
That's got to be good for everyone who touches it, right?
Actually, in the book, one of the things that I thought was really, even more horrifying than in the show is when they discover the protomolecule. One of the other things they discover is the company Protogen has already put together a branding package for what they think we can do with this thing. And that's why it's the protomolecule, is because the company's name was Protogen and they're branding it.
I hate it and I love it at the same. As a piece of fiction, I love it. I hate how real that is. That immediately took my mind to that urban legend of the fact that Big Tobacco already has pre-rolled marijuana cigarettes ready for as soon as it becomes we are just companies on the cutting edge waiting for the technicalities to land. I hate it. I hate it.
Yep.
I get it.
Same. And in this, the series mostly follows the crew of the either stolen or deeply legitimately salvaged Martian warship Tachi, renamed the Rocinante, captained by James Holden, engineered and executive officered by Naomi Nagata, piloted by Alex Kamal, and mechanicked by Amos Burton.
Everything strong done by Amos Burton.
Yes.
This cast is from them coming together in season 1. And for those of you listening, I have not done any reading because it took me 4 months to watch 6 seasons. So I haven't read any of this. So I'm only speaking from the perspective of the TV show. From them coming together, it is such an incredibly electric cast to watch these characters interact. There is so much strength of character in all of them that it is really fun to watch them buck against each other as they form that unit. It's so good. All of a sudden, knowing what I do about Alex's slight drawl as a pilot, I no longer find that quite as endearing as I might have. Bless these authors' hearts. They are cast together in quite extreme circumstances, and their first day together, they basically all die as they fight to the very last moment of their oxygen together. That's you want to have some harrowing stakes to bring humans together. That one was effective, watching them share air in space.
Man, this show has absolutely confirmed my deep conviction to never leave the planet.
This is, y'all, it was season 1 that I texted Phil. I didn't even put this in the Discord because it was such an urgent thought in my mind that I texted Philip and said, space is scary.
Right.
I hate it. I don't want to.
The fragility of life out beyond the planets is so heavily emphasized in this show and in the books. It's just a constant theme of how likely you are to die out here, and also how horribly you would die.
You
out here
will not go quietly into that terrible night. It's a scary space. From a technical,
y'all can go colonize Mars. I'm staying here.
Yeah, I no longer want Elon's ticket to Mars. I'm cool on our little dying dust ball. There is something really interesting about having grown up with the Sci-Fi Channel as having always been the home for where to watch reruns of really good sci-fi and where to watch mediocre schlocky sci-fi, and even the best of theirs still the best version of camp, because Battlestar Galactica is delightfully campy, but it's campy. The production quality from episode 1 on this show, I don't know how Sci-Fi was able to afford the first episode of. They made Sharknado 6. How did they afford episode 1 of The Expanse? It's phenomenal.
Yeah, the technical side of this is just amazing. The graphics are extremely high quality. The costuming and the props all look outstanding, and the sets look very real. Like it is just good.
One of the things that I did comment on in our research reactions portion of the Discord was that I love that this is a world that is lived in. They've got one of my favorite pieces of imaginary future tech, which is completely useless. They've got the completely transparent tablets that, project an image on their side, and you can kind of see it distorted from the other. But these tablets, especially the ones that are being used by Fred Johnson and company, they have smudges and scratches on the screens, and these little details of the world being lived in are just delightful to me. And I focus so hard on that kind of set dressing, going, oh, we are all the way here. We are so committed that everyone who has had anything to do, from fetching the paper to print the script to the very last step, we're all invested and fully in. And it just reads so well, man. Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
And so season 1 sees the crew of the Roci trying to figure out proto-molecule. And it's really interesting to know that these two stories were written by two different people, because then on the other side, we have a pulp fiction story where there is a space detective solving a missing persons case by visiting brothels and bars and interrogating hoodlums.
Yeah, there's a really strong noir element in the first book and series. It's like I was posting quotes on the Discord, and in like the first Miller chapter, you got all of his internal monologue, and you can just hear the smoky jazz music behind his monologue. And part of his internal monologue is, the circle of life on Ceres was so tight you could see the curve.
Like, that just has the sound of buzzing neon.
It's just
and
hot
Blade
nonsense.
Runner rain. It's so good, man.
And he sees a picture of Julie Mao and describes her as having a smile like the universe had just given her a kiss.
What does that even mean? That is nonsense. Stop trying to talk in jazz, man with a bad haircut. Yeah, let's be honest. Thomas Jane was given the worst haircut in the history of television.
And that haircut is a bummer.
It's so bad.
That haircut is a bummer.
And it's not even a thing in the belt. Like, when I first saw him, I was like, okay, he's a belt. We're set on a new civilization out on the fringes. He's the only one that was like, I'm going to do something dumb with my head. I don't understand it.
But also wear a fedora, like I'm in,
like I recognize my mistake.
Right. One thing about the production of this, you see it in the first season, and then it gets very much dropped in the second season, is Belters, having grown up in low grav, are wicked tall. Naomi is 2 meters tall.
I'm sure that won't get brought up.
And so she's, and so she has just like, she's head and shoulders higher than Holden. Holden and Amos are both, compared to everyone around, like neither of them is especially, but compared to everyone they're around, are all really like stocky and thick. Like they look thick and stocky compared to everyone else, because everyone else is grown up in lower gravity. Even the Martians have grown up in lower gravity, and so tend towards tall and lanky. And the Belters take that just out to an extreme. And this is partly, it's a theme in the book, because this kind of leads to an othering of Belters, because it's not just they live a long way off, it's they don't look like us. The Belt has developed its own patois, its own dialect that is wonderfully realized in the show, by a lot of actors trying really hard to do a sort of invented accent.
Boy, they go for it.
And some of them doing okay.
There is an admirable performance from all parties, though. They go for it.
Yes. Some people can really do it, and some people can't. Dominic Tipper as Naomi, when she does it, she doesn't always, but when she does it really well. And I think Kamina Drummer does a really good job with it.
David Strathairn is very fun.
I love listening to David Strathairn do it, but it's still definitely just David Strathairn.
It sure is an attempt, though, man. His character of Commander Ashford is wonderful.
I love Ashford.
Beltalowdas.
He's like a space. I mean, he is a space pirate. I don't know why I was going to go with he's like a space pirate. He's a space pirate. Yep. He walks around singing sea shanties. Yeah, it's and so there's an attempt at that in the first season, and I suspect that it was just cost prohibitive in the CGI department, and also they weren't doing it consistently. Like Miller is not.
Yeah.
There's no attempt to make Miller tall. There's no attempt to make Naomi tall. So it's just a. They do it occasionally. I think it's kind of a nod, and then kind of give up on it. I suspect for CGI reasons. And you know, you don't lose anything. I don't think really. It's an interesting thing when it's brought up in the books, but mostly it's not been important. Yeah, the one of the big importance comes when Naomi and Holden start their romantic relationship, because Holden raises the prospect of kids, and it's brought up, and you can tell that Ty Frank has done all sorts of crazy research because there's a lengthy discussion of the difficulties of childbirth in null gravity.
Oh man.
Because of course.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, of course. That would make a huge difference. And so there's just a lot of things that these world builders have obviously thought through that would never have occurred to me as something I would need to work up for a sci-fi. I mean, I'm also not writing a sci-fi space opera.
The first time that there was violence on board a spaceship that was still going to be inhabited, I was floored at the sight of a backpack vacuum cleaner to suck up the blood that's just floating through the room. That is another example of me just going, yep, I have watched things with spaceships since I was 4. And I've watched lots of action take place in space. And I've never thought to myself, how are you going to clean up after that? And this show's like, oh, we got you. We have a thing. We have a preparation for this. And I don't know why that little detail just floored me. And it's so good.
The space battles in this are incredible.
Oh my God.
Because it's one of very few sci-fi screen media that really accounts for the fact of just there's no up and down.
Yeah.
You know, you watch a Star Wars space battle and it looks like footage of a World War II dogfight because everybody stays oriented on the same side of things.
It remains grounded.
We open episode 1 with a planet embargoed by a ring of ships around its equator.
Yep.
Like there's a whole 2 halves of the planet that are not covered. And the watching ships on the screen just tumble over end over end to change directions, and all of the descriptions of the horrific effects of high gravity burns on the human body, which are deeply discussed in detail in the books.
Boy, they are unpleasant enough on the show.
Yeah. I will say from a book perspective, if medical things like discussions of biological effects of stuff make you squeamish, go into the books with caution and maybe be prepared to skip ahead a little bit, because just the book discusses exactly what long periods of heavy gravity of heavy G burns will do to the human body. And, this is well documented. We got fighter pilots that deal with this. This is just magnified. And it's, if you're interested in that area of science, then it's pretty fascinating. But if it makes you uncomfortable, then it's pretty uncomfortable.
The battles in this show. So season 1 is a wonderful and invigorating and magnetic mystery and world building experience that introduces a threat and then introduces all of the parties who will be fighting in their own way to solve the situation. Season 2 is a very rapid payoff for me to that experience, because I don't know if it's the right term, but I can only describe the battles as naval battles, because they are ship versus ship. And And watching their warfare is so beautifully savage and tactical. The way that it requires an equal part of manpower and cunning mixed with their technology to be able to shoot down torpedoes and then have a pilot be able to put you into a rotation that will enable you to just lay a spray of fire that will hopefully
Mm-hmm.
tear the hull in a way which the system can't auto seal the holes you've created. And it is hypnotizing. And like you're saying, the absolute spherical infinite nature of space being presented makes Alex so interesting to me, because I had never considered, I mean, some of these maneuvers that you see him do where he goes from heading straight a direction, top burns to throw the back end of the ship downward to then corkscrew around and head off
Mm-hmm.
like 130 degrees. It's crazy, this maneuvering. And them having the technology shown to you where everyone who is strapped in gets chemicals pumped straight into their spinal cord to help their nervous system adapt to going through this insanity. These were just riveting, that we had combat on such a huge scale that also remained
Mm-hmm.
deeply personal. It
Yeah.
was incredible to watch. And then having that mixed with having Avasarala on Earth watching the battles and knowing that the greatest impact of this space battle is on a planet that can't even affect it. It's so good. It's so large in scale and scope.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very much like, I mean, there's moments of it that is very Battlestar Galactica. It's very immediate and intimate, and there's moments of it that's much more like a Tom Clancy political thriller or something.
Right.
Like it just,
Yep.
it's got this very interesting. I think it's very hard to define genre wise. Like it's sort of a space opera, but it's also sort of a political thriller, and there's a little neo-noir mystery to it, and it's hard sci-fi, but also there's this proto-molecule thing that's not, fixed in anything we know, and so does that take it out of hard sci-fi? And so it's a very fascinating cross-genre thing. But you've said the magic name. Let us talk about Christian Avasarala.
Okay. I have adored Shora. That's the name I feel most confident in. And again, with genuine and deepest respect, we mean nothing but the highest regard if we mispronounce her name. I first met her voice on 24 with Kiefer Sutherland. And I just went, I want to hear her talk all the time. All the time. And then playing Destiny, I determined exactly who I would swear my undying allegiance to, because it's her. It's that I want to follow that voice in every instruction she gives. And now, as Christian Avasarala, humanity's in good hands in the future if she's the one running the show. She is absolutely hypnotizing in this role for me.
Yeah. Avasarala is when we meet her, she's a deputy undersecretary for executive administration, or some lengthy bureaucratic title, which basically means that she's the person who manages the planetary security side of the politics of Earth. She's a fascinating character, and they do such a good job with the adaptation of her. But in the book, she's a fascinating character, because the first time you meet her, she's in this meeting with all the generals, and she's looking around and she's observing that almost everyone in the top two ranks is men. And she's sitting there in a sea of blue and gray uniforms, wearing a bright orange sari.
I love it.
And eating and snacking on pistachios out of her purse. Like, it's just, that's your introduction to the character, and she's just thinking largely denigrating things about the posturing generals all around her. She is the most foul-mouthed
I
character
love it.
in the
I
series.
love it so much. She is
Like,
crude by my standards.
yeah. And is also this like delightful Indian grandmother who just falls apart at the sight of small children.
Yes.
And is deeply and adorably in love with her husband.
So beautiful. Oh, it's so lovely.
The relationship is very well done in the show, but you get a lot more detail of it in the book, in the second book, in Caliban's War. Yeah, that's a weird thing. If you're familiar with the books and haven't watched the show or going the other direction, something to know: the books don't align to the seasons, because season 1 is half of or maybe even 2/3 of Leviathan Wakes, with the other part of Leviathan Wakes in season 2 overlapping with the beginning of Caliban's War in season 2. And so the books kind of start to overlap each other a little bit in the seasons. And so the books often end at the mid-season break in a season. And you can kind of tell once you know that, if you ever do a rewatch, it's kind of, you kind of notice there's a plot shift about halfway through the season. Avasarala is introduced earlier and given a place in season 1 to begin to introduce that side of the show. Bobby starts off in season 2, which is also where you meet her in the books, is in Caliban's War. But in the books, Caliban's War is where we meet both Bobby and Avasarala. The only two perspectives in the first book are Holden and Miller, because the world hadn't grown that big.
Right.
I think one of the things that I find most interesting about this as a hard sci-fi is the time delay on communication. We're used to sci-fi where I can talk to someone instantaneously across the galaxy as if we're on a Zoom call together.
Right.
And as it turns out, communication can't go faster than light.
Weird.
So you are going to wait however many light minutes away you are before someone responds. And like at the low end of that, talking from Earth to Mars is like a 7-minute delay. So I say something, and then 7 minutes later, you hear me say something. And then 7 minutes after that, I hear you begin to respond. And so I talk, 14 minutes later, I get to hear you talk. 14 minutes later, you get to hear me talk.
Right. Which I had just seen realized on the HBO show Avenue 5 with Hugh Laurie, which is used for comedic intent of like, we're in an emergency and we have these silly miscommunications. And then I turn around and watch The Expanse and they're like, yeah, except for what about when we're trying to give orders or we're trying to get updates on an attack? And that really ratcheted the tension. The experience with Avasarala is the reason why early on in watching this show, I told Philip, I'm not going to be quick with this, because this is very much like a science fiction version of Game of Thrones or House of Cards in some way, in that I don't just need to be able to hear
House
what's
of Cards
said.
Is a great comparison.
Because I'm not just listening to what's being said, and I'm the guy who's on Twitter, or maybe I'm trying to edit something for YouTube while I'm watching our research. But in this, I need to also be able to see how it's being delivered, and I need to be able to watch the eye contact that's happening between people in the room, then how they're responding to it, because it's all subterfuge in the United Nations. Everything is betrayal and backstabbing. And part of that is given to you early on, but it's really only given to you because, hey, this is the big easy one. Now who else is with who? Yeah. And I am a sucker for that. I want all of that. I'm such a fan. And so I was like, hey man, I'm going to have to like watch every second of this show. And then they introduced the best space battles I've ever seen at the same time. So it was easy to watch.
Yeah. I think one of the things I liked that was in the book that it doesn't show up in the show. So in Leviathan Wakes, Holden makes a name for himself by broadcasting his allegation that their water-carrying ship, the Canterbury, has been nuked by a ship using Martian technology. He doesn't necessarily claim it was Mars, but he just lays all the facts out. Holden's got this belief that the best way to solve a problem is to let everyone know all the facts and let things fall where they are. Avasarala and most everyone else in the books thinks that's an extremely naive position.
Yeah.
Because that only works if everyone else is going to give it the same kind of cool, disinterested analysis that you are. And so Holden has caused all sorts of problems for Avasarala by the time we meet her. Just by his constant, I'm going to share everything. I'm going to share about the Canterbury. I'm going to share about the protomolecule, and so forth. And so Avasarala has decided, without having met him, that Holden must be some kind of player. He's got to have an agenda. No one could be that simple. And so the plot, or a big part of the plot of the second book, is we've met Praxidiki Mung, a botanist on Ganymede Station, which is where most of the food for the belt grows. And a battle erupts on Ganymede, and his daughter goes missing. And he is trying to find her. And through a lengthy series of things, he hires the Rocinante crew to do this. I have to tell you something from the book that's so funny and not in the show is Praxidiki gets picked up by the crew of the Rocinante, and they go back to Tycho and meet with Fred, and Holden has a big fight with Fred and gets fired by the OPA, basically. And they want to help Prax find his daughter, but they need to be paid so they can, put water and air and bullets on their ship.
Need those things.
But Prax has no money and can't pay them. And so Holden uses his celebrity to launch a crowdfunding campaign to get back Prax's daughter. It? And he kickstarts it. I think GoFundMe is probably more what we got. He basically just opens up a perpetual GoFundMe.
Perpetual.
Over the course of over the course of about 3 days, they get like millions of dollars.
James Holden.
Because James Holden, and cute little missing girl.
Yep.
So it's got all the right things, and all the news media pick it up and everything. I just think that's like a hilarious reality to present in a sci-fi novel. That's not something you would picture in a sci-fi novel.
So very utterly human.
Oh, it's so real. Yeah. And so Avasarala has security photos of James Holden and Praxidiki Mung. And so what she's trying to do in the background is figure out what's the angle, what's the OPA, who's this Praxidiki Mung guy, and what's this botanist have to do with the larger plot. And when she finally encounters them, is like, wait, it's really just a miss. There's just the
doing
surface.
Good people things. Because James Holden.
Because James Holden.
I love it.
And so that sort of miscommunication and overanalysis, I think, is again very, very human. Everyone in the books is extremely competent and doesn't make a lot of mistakes, and I think that's fairly real for the scenario because the stakes of making an error are so high. When they screw up, it's either a character thing, like Holden's tendency to broadcast all information to all people, or just I had insufficient information to make a good decision. And I like that because it keeps these highly competent characters from turning into I'm always right and I always do the right thing.
And we saw that on the show with Alex obsessively rerunning the simulation of having made a mistake in battle and it having dire consequences, and him going, no, I need to be ready. I should have done it right. I can do it right. And then having to come to grips with the fact that, like, no, you thought you could. This can't be done. You lost to laws of existence, not just physics. Like, this couldn't happen.
Yeah.
I do enjoy that.
I think one of my favorite things that comes out more in the book, I think it's very present in the show, but that comes out more in the book, is The first book is really an exploration of grief.
Mm.
It's Holden and the crew grieving the Canterbury, and it's Miller grieving Julie. And then the second book becomes really an exploration of trauma and post-traumatic stress. It's Holden was on Eros Station when the proto-molecule took it over. And by the way, turned everyone into zombies. They skipped that in the show. Proto-molecule's first step is to turn people into zombies that vomit brown goo over you that turns you into a zombie.
Oh.
That's step one. It doesn't start with pretty blue lights.
the pretty blue lights were terrifying in their own right.
Yeah,
I don't like pukey
that
zombies.
Comes later. Also, there's a high degree of horror on Eros Station. While Miller's walking through it looking for Julie, he occasionally will just see things crawl across the ground. And a couple times he'll look over and it's just a hand.
Oh, I think you can tell that in the series, they kind of toyed with it. They weren't sure how far because Eros does get right up to the line of becoming Dead Space. And I think that they decided that they wanted to remain just on this side of being true horror. Yeah. And I think that might actually make some of the borderline body horror that happens on Eros even more impactful. That they didn't full blown send it.
Yeah. I think so. I think there are things that work on a page that if you adapt them to a screen, they'd be too much. And I think this is probably one of those things where less is more when we're dealing in a visual medium. Whereas in the book, I kind of need more sometimes to get the reader to feel the same panic and alarm that the character is feeling. And so book 2 is Holden coming to terms with the fact that he's been engaged in a lengthy post-traumatic stress episode after surviving Eros, and Bobby, a new character in the second book, dealing with the post-traumatic stress of watching an entire Martian platoon torn to pieces. It's like 10 guys total in the show, a UN fire team and Bobby's fire team. In the book, the UN fire team is all that's left of the entire UN garrison that's been killed. And then the entire Martian platoon that's garrisoned there comes out. There's never any mistake that they think the UN troops are attacking them. Everybody sees the monster.
Okay.
Because everybody's suit has a camera on it. So the idea that anyone doesn't see the monster is just silly. Yeah. Everyone sees the monster. The ships see the monster from orbit. Every single Marine sees the monster. There's thousands of security cameras. Nobody doesn't see the monster. And so the Martians, there's this great moment where the UN Marines are running towards the Martian line, and then the Martians spot the monster, and without orders, because the monster jams radio signals, without orders, every Martian Marine realizes, oh, okay, it's not Martians versus UN, it's humans versus monsters right now. And so there's this lengthy gun battle in which the Martian Marines are trying to rescue the UN Marines from this monster that then proceeds to kill every Martian, including the one that's in the big giant mech suit.
That's terrifying.
Like there's a big old mech suit, and the monster just runs right up it, yanks the head off the screen off of it, and pulls the pilot out and chucks him. The proto-mutant is utterly terrifying in the books. It's very much, you can definitely tell the alien inspiration in the second book when we're dealing with the alien, with the proto-molecule hybrid.
It's a little Resident Evil in the show, not in a negative way.
Yeah.
It just has, and even down to the fact that when it's on the ship, it almost has video game mechanics to how you cheese it in one direction.
A freaky monster on the ship.
And you need to draw aggro and pull it away from its objective and then let go so that you don't die. And it's I felt at home with watching that scene.
Okay, so they do that in the book, except Prax has to do it by himself.
Oh, no, not Praxi. He's too sweet for this
because
world.
Alex has to fly the ship.
Yeah.
Amos has to go in and rescue Holden. And Naomi has to manage all of the ship's computers at once. And so there's just Prax. And it's, in the book, they've got like a little warhead. And it kind of looks like a little glass ball grenade or something. In the book, he's got a rod of plutonium or of uranium wrapped in lead foil.
This man's a botanist.
And he's in a vac suit, and he's never done an EVA.
Oh man.
And so there's this really deeply human and hilarious moment where he goes out on the ship, deals with the vertigo, which is described really well and apparently really accurately for space. I have no idea. I don't need to be told.
Yep, I trust him.
That I can't handle the void.
I can't handle thinking about the void.
I can't handle the void.
Yeah, no interest in exploring this.
But everybody walks around on mag boots, except Prax has never had to do that because he's always lived on Ganymede. And so he gets out on the ship and realizes he can't move because he's wearing a suit that's designed or that was set to Amos's settings. And so Prax's legs aren't actually strong enough to lift the mag boots. And so he has to adjust the boots for a small person.
Prax
is such a good character in both. I think Prax is one of the most changed characters from book to screen. Prax in the show is very much got kind of a Sherlock Holmes is the wrong way to put it because he's not rude to anyone. He's extremely nice and polite, but he is. He lives in his head.
Mm-hmm.
He's entirely an academic. He lives in his head. He understands plants. He doesn't do people very well. He loves his daughter. And that's about the extent of humanity that he's good at.
And that's not shown as a negative.
And so...
That's fine.
No, it's not at all.
It's never been a problem because he's never
got an entirely different way of thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so... his relationship with Amos is different, but it's still exactly as delightful. I think that friendship between Prax and Amos is so cool.
I do too. My best friend, Amos.
I think that scene isn't there in the book because it's not in character for book Prax. It's implied. And I love that they put it on the show because Amos is not a perspective character. You get Amos from the outside, at least so far. I don't think Amos ever becomes one, but at least so far he has not. But I love that scene. So we have, the scene where they finally find his daughter and Prax says, "This is my best friend in the whole world, Amos." And I love watching Amos register that comment.
Can we, as we near the end of our time here, can we freak out about Amos just a little bit?
Can we please?
I am so genuinely touched by not only the writing, but the portrayal of this character. Wes Chatham was incredible in this. He is a character who I wanted to watch when he was just the hard-ass muscle guy. And then I became invested because he goes and... If you've been listening to the show for a while, this is an analogy that I think is very apt. He's very much on a journey like Roy Kent from Ted Lasso, where he has an example that he begrudgingly surrenders to. For Roy, it's Ted. For Amos, it's Holden. And they don't change who they are fundamentally. He is still the hyper masculine character, but he turns it into such a healthy version and such a positive traditional masculinity. I cannot get enough of him being the person who's willing to be who you need him to be. He's never forcing himself into a situation or a scenario or violence. he's there for the people that he signed up to be there for. And you and I have discussed that the book, he's much quicker to fall into the captain role of calling James captain. I love that it hits when he doesn't just accept him in that position, when he surrenders to him in that position. And then we get that beautiful conversation with Naomi and him talking about when he first called her that. And it's just lovely to watch Amos as a character. He is phenomenal in this show that is arguably ultimately about equality between races, genders, and all identities. To see this version in the future, to be so many generations out and see this incredibly positive, healthy masculinity. I adore Amos and Wes Chatham for giving him to us.
You know, you look at Amos and you expect him to be Adam Baldwin from Firefly.
Yeah.
Like, you expect him to be the Jane on the ship. And, you know, if you were going to cast the characters of Firefly into the ship, that's where he'd be. He'd be Jane. But to make the non-obvious choice, both as novels and as a series, to make him a character with some real depth. And I love that he's not a perspective character, because who he is would be too obvious if he was a perspective character. Instead, we get to see this slow growth of this. And I love that, like, in season 3, speaking to another character, talking about the cleaning plants that they've installed on the ships and Prax, Amos says, yeah, those were installed by Prax. And then he pauses. He's my best friend in the whole world. Like, that turn back that title onto him is so good. And Amos's need to see redeemability in people, I think is again an unexpected character trait that almost certainly derives from his own background in as a criminal, as a murderer. So he remains, you know, he doesn't ever become. You know, you see those that there's this meme kind of chart of looks tough is tough, looks tough is soft, looks soft is tough, like that kind of thing. Amos looks tough and he is tough, but there's depth to it. And I like seeing that, because we don't see it very often in media. Usually the tough person who looks tough is just tough. And Amos and Bobby are both very much that way. There's a wonderful, wonderful scene in the book after they rescue May, because by the time they rescue May, everybody's on the ship. Bobby's on the ship, Avasarala's on the ship, Holden and crew are on the ship. And so all the perspectives are on the Rosie. And Prax and Holden are having a conversation about Prax's sudden discovery that he's a millionaire. And so somebody's Avasarala asks where May is, and Holden says that she's in engineering with Amos. And so Avasarala goes to look for her, and she finds Amos and Bobby playing catch with May.
Oh,
very literally, they're in Null G and they're tossing May back and forth across the machine shop as though she were the ball.
I love that so much.
They're like, Amos and kids is so sweet. And there's some really great little monologues where you get the abused background of Amos in the second book that explains why he needs, much more than Prax does, actually, to find who did this to May and end them.
He is that guy.
And it's just really good. He is that guy. Yeah, that scene is not in the book. I'm very sorry to tell you.
I'm so grateful it is in the show. Oh, man. That is.
Oh, yeah. It's such a good scene. And it works so well in the show. The scene is much less. That scene is less heavy in the book. Actually, all the action sequences in that part of the story are a little more Tom Clancy, Jack Reacher, a little less George R. R. Martin. like Bobby versus the monster in the show. I don't know. Tell me if you read this. In the show, when Bobby's fighting the monster's on top of her trying to get her. Does it seem like they're implying that the monster pauses and exposes its weakness to Bobby so that she can kill it?
So prior to that fight, I could see some intention behind them trying to find like a scrap of human consciousness. But no, not in that moment. I didn't.
Okay. Because I almost read, because like the monster kind of backs away and turns its head around, and that's when she's able to get the gun around to the back of its head and blow it up. But there's this very, tense thing in the book. It's creepy because the monster has her down, and instead of like tearing open her suit, it's clear that the monster has decided she's useful and starts trying to assimilate.
Oh
God! And so it walks up and pukes all over her suit. And then that doesn't work because she's in a vacuum sealed power suit. And so then it starts like extruding tentacles and trying to find a way into the suit. And so Bobby just muscles the suit until it breaks so she can lift the arm, puts the head against the gun and says, bye-bye, and then fires the entire magazine into the thing's head until it stops existing.
Wow.
So there's a lot more quippiness to the action, whereas I think in the show you get a little more weightiness to it. But the tone of the show works very well. So I'm not saying that as a criticism. It's just it is there is a different tone to the book. The book has a somewhat more thriller tone, whereas the show is a little more heavy on contemplativeness, I think.
This is one that if you've made it to this part of the podcast, you will recognize we've gone a little bit less in structure and a little bit more in conversation of what the show is. At the very top, Philip said, this is a huge cast of characters. It's just not possible for us to have given you a rundown of every season because everyone has substantial aspects of the story given to each and every one of them. I would argue, I love the way you phrase it, and I'm sure it's the correct term for it, but calling them perspective characters. The show doesn't feel like it has that, especially the later it gets. It doesn't feel like there's really that much of a supporting cast. It has an extended cast to a substantial main cast. If they are on the Rocinante, they are important. If they talk to the people on the Rocinante more than once, they are important, and we'll get scenes without the main characters. This one's big.
So to that point, let me ask you this: your favorite non-crew member of the Rossi?
Okay, so it would be cheating probably to say Ashford because he's just so fun to watch. Favorite character or favorite portrayal? Because Marco Inaros is terrible.
Favorite portrayal.
Boy,
favorite portrayal. Favorite
Marco
person
Inaros,
to watch.
He's the best pirate villain.
He's such a good scene chewing villain. He's just.
He walked out of Die Hard.
He's so pretty.
He walked out of Die Hard and straight.
Oh my gosh! Yes,
he's that big '80s villain, man, and
he's definitely here to take over Nakatomi Plaza.
100%. I just love that, like, when the chips are down for the bad guys, he walks into a room and gives a speech, and everyone starts chanting his name. That's the kind of like over the top evil villain that people attempting to kill Bond aspire to be. I mean, none of these people are paid by him.
He literally throws an asteroid at the Earth.
Asteroid at the Earth. Oh my! And it hits.
He is a Bond villain.
100%.
He is a Bond villain,
and he's the most successful one ever. He kills everything, man. It's amazing. He's so good. There are wonderful portrayals, but I never saw Marco Inaros come on screen and ever felt, all right, let's get through this scene. Never. I couldn't
He's
wait
magnetic.
to hear who he was going to put down, put in their place, who he was going to snake charm. I love it. Keon Alexander, thank you. You absolutely crushed Marco Inaros. I loved it. How about you? Who's your favorite?
I think drummer.
Yeah, she's right there.
I love Kamina Drummer. She's so delightful when she's cutting with her words. Like she has some seriously good cutting lines.
Oh, she's mean.
She does. I think she does. I think she does the Belter accent more successfully than anyone else on the show.
I would agree.
And that's important because she does it the whole time. Unlike Naomi, Naomi goes in and out of it, but Kamina's got it the entire time, and I think does it very successfully and convincingly. I love the visual of the character. I think she's one of the coolest looking characters. Again, Ashford's got that never explained burn across an entire side of his face, and that's a strong choice. But just Kamina with the coal blacked eyes and the cool tattoo, like and the power bun hair.
She's strong.
That's
She's
never
strong.
down. She is. And the portrayal by Kara G, when that strength breaks the couple of times that it does, it's such strong acting.
It is.
Like in the last season when she and Naomi meet again on her ship, seeing her, she's so driven, and she's someone whose drivenness has caused her to basically put aside everything else, including everyone she loves. And I 100% expected her to be dead at the end.
Absolutely.
Like she's just got all the vibes of someone who's out, and she's going to go out in this amazing, like she's going to ram her ship into Marco or something like that. And I liked that it subverted that. I liked that it didn't give it that, because I think one of the things I appreciate about this show is it doesn't give its characters easy outs.
There's so many consequences in this show.
Everyone has to deal with the decisions that they made. And I like that. And I hope we will get to see Kamina Drummer deal with the decisions that she makes in the last couple of seasons, because I think that's her as the head of the Gate Transit Corporation,
I did
or whatever.
See that coming.
That was
not
amazing.
Ready for
that
Holden.
was so amazing. Watching Avasarala get outplayed.
What a great conclusion for her, if that's where it ends. She just
such a good moment. I know we're hitting time. Do you have any favorite quotes? This is such a quotable show, and there's so many episodes, so it would be hard to give just one, but just a few.
I love the line from season 2 from Holden, and this is because even though the show may not be as heavy in it as the books were, I love the confrontation of trauma that the show has. And when Holden says, "I need you to remind me of who I am so I can come back," is so strong for a person about to confront trauma. That's so powerful and vulnerable that I really connected with that.
From season 3, Amos, a kid needs at least one person who never gives up on them, no matter what.
Hits.
Like that just, oh man, doesn't it? It just,
as people whose lives have been affected by adoption, I feel like that hits us as well. Like just, that's so absolutely true. Usually when a man is about to lose everything, he realizes what mattered to him most. He sees it clearly for the first time. It's Anderson Dawes. It's
Clace Ashford. Guilt is like salt. You put a little on and it hides all the bitterness.
Oh man. If you wanted to boil Amos down into a line, I think it's, the way I see it, there's only 3 kinds of people in this world. Bad ones you follow, and ones you need to protect. And boy, Do I love Amos?
From Detective Josephus Miller. Did it come across in the show that his
No.
full name is
No,
Josephus at any point? Okay. Yeah, it's Josephus. Just that's wonderful. I didn't kill him because he was crazy. I killed him because he was starting to make sense. I love that line and that moment. That is also in the book, and it is exactly the same thing. And it is just
my last one isn't a deep, impactful one. It's the first one that I put up in the Discord because early on, it sets the tone for what season 1 is going to feel like when Detective Miller says, "No laws in series, just cops." That is so dark.
Yeah, it's so dark. And then also from this is also from Miller. I'm going to count to 1.
1. And then he says it. I love it so much. Oh, this was wonderful. Philip, thanks for getting me into this one, man. I'm halfway sorry it took so long, and on the other hand, I'm glad that I took this as seriously as I did because
I wouldn't have gotten 2 books in if you'd been
that's
faster,
true. So in that case, I'm not even half sorry. You're welcome.
Right, there you go.
This was man, I'm glad I didn't get into it because we got to do this and have this pointed and purposeful conversation. But you know, you're the one with the list. You can give the thanks here to the people that made this thing.
Oh gosh, I mean, the list is so large that it is sorry, that it is hard to offer. But to JSA Corey, both of you, to the producers at Alcon Entertainment that had the confidence to go for this, to Amazon Studios. It feels weird to thank Amazon for things, for rescuing this show, for picking up this show, and realizing its potential when it was dropped, to the astonishingly good and diverse cast of this show, to the numerous writers of the various episodes and directors, and the amazing technical crew. I mean, this isn't a movie, so we can't just list one, graphic design, like the list would go too long, but to all of the amazing technical crew and props designers and computer engineers and set makers and everybody who made this thing look the way it does. An enormous and hearty thank you.
Absolutely.
From us.
This is something special. And if it ends and you are just starting it, I assure you it ends with love. And if it doesn't end, they hit pause with adoration for their potential future. Philip, if people wanted to get in touch with you on the internet or see you doing other things or hear you doing other things, where would they find you and what would you be doing?
You can hear me playing RPGs on the Ever Renewed podcast. You can see me running RPGs on the Laughing Tree YouTube channel. We haven't run the Expanse. Maybe we'll do a one-shot on the Expanse. That'd be cool. The Expanse, an Expanse episode. I think everybody. I don't know if Eric has watched the Expanse. Everybody else has done the Expanse now. So. And if you want to talk to me about RPGs and other nerdy things, at Laughing Tree Inn.
I am on
Twitter.
all social medias at SorryBTR. The O is a 0. You can also sometimes find me on Twitch under the same name, usually just talking about nerdy things and or life things. And I am also on the aforementioned Laughing Tree D&D show with Philip. Check us out. Throw a sub. And in the meantime, thanks for getting into it with us.